Hello everybody, hello everybody. This is Professor Roundtree for Marketing 3143 Market Research. Today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about Chapter 1 in this particular course. And so here we're talking a little bit about the role of marketing research, and to kind of give you a feel for understanding how and why people come to a conclusion that they need to do some kind of market research. We'll talk about some of the common usages of market research, and there are many of them. And hopefully you'll gain an appreciation for the way customers use information. Not customers in the sense that we look at them as consumers of products, but organizations that consume the market research as a product or service. Then also what we'll do is we'll tie in the whole marketing concept. If you probably remember from concepts, it's going to be the whole notion of being market-oriented rather than being product-oriented. And we're going to tie that into how market research helps you be more market-oriented. Then we'll take a look at some of the more common mistakes in market research, and there are many of them. And also, too, we'll figure out that it's not always the best decision to conduct market research. And we're going to talk about some of the reasons why you might want to, and then some you may just say, we need to do without or find another alternative to get some answers. And then we'll talk about some different types of market research studies that organizations get involved with and kind of how they use it. And then finally, we'll end up by talking to the notion of careers in market research. Now, not everybody is looking for a career in market research, but just to give you an appreciation for some of the roles and the titles and what they actually do. But if you're going into a career in marketing, you will spend time engaging with market research. Either you will actually go out and collect market research data. Anytime you have customer contact, that's market research. Or you may outsource it to a company that does it as a professional, and then you as a brand manager will be a consumer of marketing research, where you can hopefully use that to make informed decisions. So what are some of the common uses of market research? Usually when you do market research, it could be under the guise of benchmarking where you are as a brand, as an organization. So typically, whenever you conduct market research in brand awareness, customer satisfaction, loyalty, how people use your product and the patterns with which they use your product or your competitor's product, customers' perceptions, looking at a competitive analysis, anytime we undertake any of this type of market research, usually it's going to be within the confines of a research program. So generally, you go out and collect data and you use it and compare it to some kind of benchmark. It could be the data you collected previously, so more of a time series kind of thing. Or you benchmark it against what's going on with your competition. And some of the major customers, again, customers of research are people who use the research. Many of us here at the university, we look at customer research or potential student research or parent research, all to try to find out what is it that students want as it relates to a university. When they're applying here, we constantly ask people questions about their experience while they're here to kind of gauge what might be changed. We have students evaluate faculty every single semester in every one of our classes. That's going to be a classical component of that. And we also do research with alumni, organizations that want to partner with the university, all to try to figure out how do we provide some value to entice them to invest in the university. The traditional one that we all probably are aware of are businesses, and there are many different things that you could use for a business. You could find out about what's going on with your sales, your market share, customer satisfaction. You could do some market research internally to figure out if there's customer satisfaction across different departments within your organization. A whole lot of different things that you could actually do and use. And as far as the government is concerned, I think most people probably look at that as an opportunity to figure out if taxpayers are getting their money's worth. So how satisfied are they, for example, with the IRS or some other government agency, to try to gauge whether or not there should be some changes that kind of map on and match up pretty well with customers, taxpayers' expectations. And the final one, nonprofits, you'll find that in hospitals and and other nonprofit organizations. Many times it's market research that's done to see if the services that they're providing to the community or the constituents matches up to the expectations, but also to, just as importantly, what are the expectations of the people who write checks and donate to these nonprofits. So formally defining market research, I mean, this is a long and elaborate type of definition. You don't necessarily have to commit this to memory, but the important point is we're looking to go out, acquire information that we can then use to make some kind of decision. And the decision is really, hopefully, to make some sort of reduction in the risk in this decision making. So opening up a new plant, coming to market with a new brand, all those things can be done, but if they're done in isolation from research, what may happen is you will be making ill-informed decisions, and you just may waste money, you may waste time, or both. So what kinds of things? I always say problems. Problems are really what we're looking for, and that's going to be the impetus for doing any kind of market research. Now, problems don't necessarily mean that it's always a negative. A problem could be you just don't know why sales are going up exponentially. It sounds like a great thing, which it is, but you want to find out how can you replicate it? How can you actually do it over again? But normally when we see problems, we usually couch it in the negative. Declining sales, lower customer satisfaction, people keep bringing back your product because it's defective, market share is slipping or declining, and then you have more products that are actually being returned. Not that they're defective, but people just find another usage for it. So you really want to find out the whys behind it. And then you could also use it to explore. Maybe you want to find out which market might be the next one you should go into. Anytime Whole Foods decides it wants to open a new store, they do lots of market research in different neighborhoods around the country to find out which marketplace has a demographic consistent, more upscale, health conscious, having resources to spend, because Whole Foods is a premium priced grocery store or supermarket. We could talk about cost cutting and efficiencies. A lot of consultants will do this when companies are looking to streamline. They're trying to figure out how can they cut some fat out of their budget, which departments are redundant. You see this very often when there are mergers or acquisitions where you have two accounting departments. You don't need more than one accounting department. But the question would be, what portion of each of the accounting departments when you're merging together need to be retained, and which one of those are more redundant? And then you may think about the traditional environmental analysis. That's the stuff that you guys probably remember from concepts, also called environmental scanning, where you take a look at the changes and trends in technology and economics, the competitive environment, social and cultural trends. Maybe there's some trend that's going on in terms of some political and legal issues that are relevant to your particular industry or your company in particular. And we have to really truly understand how to apply the marketing mix. What combination, depending on the market segment and what they respond to and what's going on in the competitive landscape. Maybe it's a change in the product that you might need. Possibly it's an adjustment to the price. Maybe your promotion, advertising and other types of promotions, sales or trade promotions, maybe those just aren't effective, and we want to find out why they're not effective. Is it the actual messaging? Is it the believability in the copy that we have in our ads? Maybe it's just the media that we're placing the ads in. We're not being effective in connecting with the target market because the messaging is being put into an outlet that doesn't truly connect with our target market. The one thing I really want to add in here too is generally when we think about these P's, these are the traditional 4 P's of marketing. However, you'll hear me constantly talk about this, but when we're talking about services, and not just traditional services, but services that are more what I would call interactive services, taking a flight on an airplane, going to a hotel. Once we start looking at services that go beyond these 4 P's, we start to think about the 3 additional P's of service, which are people, process, and physical evidence. People kind of refers to the interaction between service provider and service user, as well as the interaction amongst customers. So that experience that you have on that air flight from here to Chicago, and you realize that the level of satisfaction is partly determined by the person you're sitting next to. Everybody's had that experience sitting next to the drunk guy, and you want to ring that bell whenever you see that drunk guy. Also, too, process. Process is the steps that people go through when they have service delivered to them. There's usually a logical order of the steps, and sometimes too there may be an order that you have your process in, but it just may not make sense logically based on what the consumer is looking for. For example, if you're looking to go and stay in a hotel, the logical order is you go check in first and then you go upstairs and place your order for room service. So trying to place an order for room service without checking in makes absolutely no sense. Going to the airport, most people decide that when they go to the airport, they have a certain preference. Some people get there really early if they have some sort of a first come, first seated kind of policy there at the airport for a particular airliner. So some people will get to the airport 2 hours early so they can make sure they get in queue and get a high number so they can actually get on the plane. So again, people process. Physical evidence is that which organizations use to try to tangibilize an otherwise untangible type of service. So you see it in the hotels and the quality of the artwork, the linen they have in the hotel rooms, the quality of the decor throughout. They may have a piano bar. They might have a couple of upscale restaurants in a very upscale hotel. And also, too, if we're looking at a lower end, a budget type of motel that we see along the highway. Generally, it's not going to be very much upscale, going to be no frills. You might, if you're lucky, get a little bottle of shampoo, but by and large, you're going to get a bar of soap and maybe 1 or 2 towels. Again, physical evidence is trying to tangibilize an otherwise untangible service or intangible service. Now, as you probably remember from concepts, it's this whole concept of the marketing concept, which really contrasts the difference between product orientation and market orientation. Generally, a company that's product oriented, they're going to primarily focus on creating the best product. Oftentimes you see this with technology companies, believing that if they have the best technology, it will sell. Now, with market research, many companies are more market oriented. You go out and you do research to find out what are the unmet needs that customers have and what kinds of benefits they're looking for. And then you can find a way how you can differentiate it from marketing offerings that are currently in the marketplace. Or you may figure for a new to market kind of service or product, figure out exactly what it is that they want. Sometimes people have what we call unsought needs. You see that with things that people don't really know they need until they need it, usually like insurance and things of that nature. So again, market orientation is really where the market research component comes in. You're trying to do research to find out what needs are unmet and what type of marketing mix you need to put together to appeal, to satisfy that need in a way that's different from all your competitors. So, what are some of the market research mistakes that people have? Some people, organizations, fail to do market research at all. They think they know it all just because they have an MBA or they have a great degree from GW or some other great school. And keep in mind, if you fall into the trap of believing that you are a marketing research sample of one and that you know everything that's going on in the marketplace, without actually talking to people outside of your circle within your organization, you're going to miss out on an awful lot. So make sure that you realize that you're not the expert and I'm not the expert. We need to go and talk to consumers about what they want. Sometimes companies also just use secondary data. Again, secondary data is data that's already been collected through some other source. For example, census data is the largest secondary database that there is in existence. They try every 10 years to survey 100% of the population. They're not always successful, but it is way beyond what any market research program would do, which is basically going to be done on a sampling basis and extrapolated to a population. But a lot of times what happens is companies, because of lack of resources, because again, getting to that first point, they think they know it all already, they may go the cheap route and go for secondary resources or data. They might conduct the wrong kind of research. They may use focus groups when interviews are better. If you really need to drill down to an individual level where you need to probe more one-on-one, having interviews will probably be better. If you think that you want a depth and a breadth across a number of people who have some similarities but may have some differences and unique opinions, focus groups might be important. But all in all, this type of research, focus groups, interviews, those are always a precursor to doing a survey, because you get a lot of rich and insightful information when you're able to interact and talk with people versus just having them respond to a piece of paper and a paper and pencil task. Also, too, sometimes researchers who are inexperienced, they tend to have their own biases. And their own biases oftentimes kind of gets to that first point at the very top, too, thinking they already know the answers. And so they go in trying to confirm that they are right. And oftentimes what they might find is that if they don't keep their eyes open and conduct the research properly, they're going to miss out on some of the true insights that customers might have about what's actually going on. Sometimes we spend too much time and money on the wrong type of research. Sometimes people think that, all we need to do is do a survey. Well, the survey is only as good as the words that are written on a piece of paper. And so many times doing qualitative work, like I mentioned previously, things like focus groups and in-depth interviews, that might give you a better opinion about how to word a question or what are the important issues to really ask questions about. And so a lot of times, when people do that, they tend to do it because that's an experience that they've had before and nobody really ever told them any better. But if there's one thing you learn from this course, qualitative research generally, assuming that the resources are there, will precede quantitative data such as surveys. Your surveys will be much better if you conduct qualitative research up front. And then also, too, sometimes people, unknowingly use the wrong sample of respondents. So if you're looking for people's opinions about Medicare, as an example, meaning seniors or someone being close to the senior age, would you ever go and sample a bunch of undergraduates at any university? No, it makes no sense. But you wouldn't also look at people who are in the retirement age bracket and ask them about their perceptions of, let's say, higher education. Not to say that they can't achieve higher education at that level, but the odds are the folks there are not going to be plentiful compared to the traditional 20 to 22-year-old age group. And then also, too, in this day and age, people rely too much on the internet. Not all information, secondary data and otherwise, are exclusively on the internet. There are some things that you can only get in printed material because, after all, some of the stuff that you may want to have access to were conducted in terms of research prior to the internet. So it could be data that's 20 years old and it just may not have made it into Google search. And then finally, conducting research with a predisposition to an outcome, that kind of ties back into, the first point. Thinking we already know the answer. If you think you know the answer already, why conduct research? And the answer probably is you don't know the answer already. So that's why you really should conduct research with an open mind. Now, there are times when you really shouldn't do research. You should be reluctant to conduct market research if you have a few of the following criteria. Sometimes the decision has already been made. Now, managers in many industries oftentimes will have a decision already made, and what they'll do is they'll backfill it by doing some research to hopefully confirm the decision that they're going to make. Or they'll hire a consultant and pay several $100,000 for the consultant essentially to kind of wink tell them exactly what it is that they want to hear, which is basically the decision that they've already made. So why waste your money? Just move forward, and if it happens to bomb, just take the responsibility for it. Many times, legitimately, people don't conduct research because they just don't have the resources or the money. Conducting research is not free. Secondary research generally is cheaper than doing primary research, which is collecting your original data. But even then, you have to have somebody not only to collect the data, but the person or individuals have to analyze the data, and then you really should do something with it. But if you don't have the money to do it, that's a great reason for not conducting research. Some people just don't buy into the usefulness of research. So if the person at the top doesn't believe that there's any value in conducting their research because he or she is the expert, why waste your time and waste your money? You see that a lot in organizations. CEO or president of a unit, they think they know the answer, so they just don't spend any kind of money on it. If the information is already available, especially if it's in the public domain, why go and reinvent the wheel if the information you can get is free? Okay. The cost-benefit analysis is negative. You're going to spend more than the benefit that you're going to get from the results, then you shouldn't be conducting research. But I think with that, I'd have to qualify that by saying sometimes the cost, no matter what it might be, may outweigh the benefit if the data you collect is not analyzed and nothing is implemented. So you'll never know what the return is if the research report just sits in your desk drawer for 6 months or a year. And finally, there's a lack of clear focus or objectives. Again, this is another thing that starts at the top. So haphazardly going and collecting data for data's sake doesn't make any sense, because if you don't know what it is that you're looking for, you might as well hold off. And sometimes it might mean hiring the right research director, a person who can really truly conduct a research program where you're not wasting your money. Now, there are three primary types of market research studies. The first one is more of in a descriptive nature. They're designed to answer in a relatively quick way who is consuming our product, what products are they consuming, where they're consuming it. Very simple and basic, not very complicated types of questions that are answered by the research. The more diagnostic research, I mean, that's really where you're trying to figure out the whys. Why are people actually buying more of our product? And so when we start talking about these kinds of diagnostics, it's really looking at more in terms of the analytical tools that you'll use. Usually it's going to be some kind of correlation analysis. Is there any other behavior that's correlated with their increased consumption in our product? Is there any correlation in where they live that makes sense, that would make sense to look at it compared to increases in consumption of our product? So it's really using correlation analysis to see if we can see some pattern in something that describes who these people are, given that they have a certain behavior. In the example I gave, consuming more of our product. And lastly, the more complicated type of research study is more the predictive. And that's really where you're trying to find, how do you predict behavior? What variables will contribute to predicting someone's behavior? And the behavior could be the propensity to come back and buy our product. It could be the propensity to buy our product at a certain volume level. And typically the tools that people will use in terms of the analytics will typically be more predictive modeling, such as regression analysis at a basic level. Now, I know not everybody wants to be a market researcher, but here are just some examples of some of the titles that you might see at a marketing research company. The kinds of things that you'll see as an undergraduate coming out of a great undergraduate program in business with a concentration in marketing. You're probably going to be something along the lines of maybe an assistant or associate director of research. Many of these positions are usually taken by folks who are stats majors or statisticians. They love and embrace data, but don't be afraid to go after these jobs, because a lot of times those folks who have the data and analytics down know nothing about business. So the more data that you can embrace, the better off you're going to be, because you're going to have, I guess, what I would call a two skill set kind of a person. So you'll have the analytics side, but you'll also have the wide range of knowledge that you need to be successful in business. And these are some other examples of some of the titles and the roles that you'll have. Again, most of them are related more so to either analysis or the collection of data. And so somebody who's going to be in the field, they're going to actually go ahead and train and select people, conduct the market research, and then they come back and they might have some hand in actually coding the data, analyzing the data, but usually you'll hand the ball off to somebody who's more of an analyst, and then you will eventually move up what I would call the data food chain to people who can implement. these folks at the top 1, 2, or 3 levels, these are the people who take the data that the people in the field collect and that the analysts put into a format that's readable. These are the people who read the data and hopefully make some decisions based on what the analysis says. All right, so that's it for chapter 1. And so the next time, I guess I will see you in chapter 2. So remember, follow the data.